This is Hard Parking, proudly sponsored by Right Honda and Right Toyota out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Of course, I'm your host, Jay Finning, recording from my home studio in Gilbert, Arizona. Second floor, right across from my mother-in-law's room. I share a wall with the upstairs restroom, which is why I have a neon sign that I literally plug in when I'm recording, although it's not plugged in right now. But what happens is my mother-in-law will get up out of her room or just happen to want to use the restroom or take a shower when I'm recording. It hasn't happened in a long time because I've had that light up for a couple of years, but it's one of those deterrents. It's like you can't miss it. One time when my daughter was living here, she walked right past the sign, went in and started taking a shower in the middle of the day when I was recording, and you can't miss the sign. So that was kind of a blatant F you. I want to take a shower. I'm going to do what I want. F your rules, F your sign, F your podcast. But anyway, coming up on today's show, Wes Tankersley is going to join us for about 15 minutes or so, and we're going to talk about his Honda Civic purchase. Anytime you guys purchase a new car, yes, even you, Mr. Herndon, you're more than welcome to come on the show and talk about your vehicle and vehicles, whether you like them or hate them. I know you have some strong opinions about certain vehicles, and that's coming up later. Before we get to this word for Wheel Online, I wanted to talk about a couple little, kind of small deals. I went to a couple cars and coffee style events this last weekend. Go to this place, I think I've talked about it before, called 404. It's in Scottsdale. Nice little Old Town Scottsdale. Nice little coffee shop on a corner off the beaten path, or like a block off the beaten path. And you stand there and you talk about things, and you usually don't talk about cars at these events, not that much. So, and I've said that before, for you non-car people, that's what you think we do. No, we just talk, catch up on life. What have you been up to? Have you heard about this? So-and-so said this. A lot of male gossip. But one of the guys walked up when I was talking to some of my friends, and, he was like, hey, guys, I don't remember if he said come here often or whatnot, but we started talking about, what's going on and who's got what car, and he asked me about my car and my podcast and things like that. Introduced himself. I'm not going to tell you his name because hopefully you'll get to learn more about him. Well, actually, his name is Gentry. But you'll get to learn more about him if he ever becomes a guest on the show. But he asked, what's the podcast about? And, I tried to explain it to him, and he got it. He understood it, and he thought it was cool. I didn't do the full definition that you give Rebecca, but it's kind of a Cliff Notes version of that. But he agrees that, the cars, they bring us together. And super nice kid, says he's been living everywhere in the world for the last year. He's been living out of Airbnbs. That tells you something right there. You're not a normal person. No one does that. It's very expensive. Spent some time here. I think he spent some time in California. Spent some time, in Europe or something. And I go, you know what? Because one of the worst things you can do when you're meeting people is ask them what they do for a living. And so I didn't ask that question. But from that comment of what he's been doing for the last year, I'm like, cool guy, nice, great conversationalist. There's a lot to unpack there. And so hopefully I'll be able to get him on the show in the future, and we'll actually talk about what it is I discovered when he followed me and I followed him back. I go, oh, that's pretty freaking cool. We got to talk about that. So, hopefully that comes up. But I say all that because cars bring all of us together. And then that's where it stops. You park the car, you get out, and you start talking about anything, typically but cars, and it's just like, oh yeah, I had one of those back in the day, or oh, I really want that car one day in the future. Another thing is the whole Israel-Gaza thing. I haven't talked about that. Fortunately, I don't have any strong affiliations either way. It's just a big mess. And I would say that, be careful if you're talking about it. Be careful if you're posting about it. If you're reposting stuff, try as hard as you can to fact check and think twice about what it is you're posting, because you could be remembered for whatever it is you say. And it happens all the time. And I know there's people out there who say, I don't care what anyone says about me or thinks about me. And I did a podcast episode on that a couple years ago. I get it, but at the end of the day, it does matter what you say if it can come back to hurt you. And it does matter what people say and think about you if they have any importance to you, or if it has any impact on your life financially, career, reputation. So you got to be careful. And I'm not saying that because anybody that I know said anything and I cringed. I'm just saying in general, because there's a podcast I listen to, and I was going to talk about this on my Patreon, but I'll just touch on it a little bit right now. It's called the All In Podcast, and it's an example of a podcast that doesn't have to have perfect audio, and people still love it. It's one of the biggest podcasts in the world. They've had 3 presidential candidates on there so far, and they grill the hell out of them. You know, Elon Musk spoke at one of their annual conferences. They're a big deal, but you know, they've talked about it. And I feel like, and it's called All In, the All In Podcast. And I feel like when I listen to it, that's one of the only times during the week, because they only release every Thursday, I get done consuming something and I feel like I'm smarter or better educated about things that are going on in the world, because there's no bias. I mean, the only bias they have is their own bias, right? So what I mean is, you can watch CNN and you feel like it's a little left or right leaning. I don't really know which is which, honestly. You can watch MSNBC, you know, you can watch the news channels, Fox News, and the information that you consume sometimes has a slight twist to it. And when you listen to this podcast, there is none of that. And it's a group of 4 or 5 guys, really 4, but sometimes there's 5 or 6 of them because they interchange. And they all, sometimes they agree on everything, sometimes they disagree, but it's not argumentative. They make great points in whether they're talking about the Israel, Gaza thing, or they're talking about our economy, or they're talking about science. You know, a couple months ago, I went and got a calcium CT score exam, and I'm a little young for that at 47, but they talked about it once, and that's an exam that can save your life, especially if you don't know your family history. And I don't know my family history because I'm adopted. And it's an elective outpatient exam. A lot of insurances don't cover it, but a lot of people give you discounts for going and getting it done. So I walked in prepared to spend $300 or $400 for this exam, which sounds crazy. But if it's something that can save your life, and statistically it can, then why not? I ended up paying like $100 to get it done, which was the special that my hospital was running. And I came out clean. My calcium score was 0. And if your calcium score is anything above 0, they put you on medication to get it down. But I learned about that on the All In Podcast. And they're never going to hear this. I mean, they're as top tier as you can get. You know, Joe Rogan and them are way out there, but there's a big difference between All In and stuff like Joe Rogan. And it makes you feel like you're a smarter person. You guys know I don't consider myself political. Well, I'm political, but this podcast isn't political. And I'm not going to go into the exact details of what happened, but I will on the Patreon. You know, I was recently accused from someone that I thought was a friend who actually blocked me on social media a few years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, over a minor disagreement over something with Donald Trump. And they just came out of the blue and started calling me out the other day. But one of the things that they called me was a libtard, you know, which is the derogatory term of a liberal. And I'm not a liberal. There's people who may think I'm a liberal. But when I hear stuff like that, and a lot of the stuff that this person said was not true, but I got really upset. You know, unfortunately, I talked to Wes about it and a few other people, and they kind of talked me down a little bit. Not in an escalatory violence way, but like, you know, anybody who really knows me knows what this stuff this person was saying isn't true. But it hurt me because I used to consider this person a friend. I've spent time in this person's business. I used to send this person business. But to call me a libtard, they're a very diehard affiliation of one of the political parties. We'll put it that way. And you can guess, it doesn't matter which one of those two you're saying. You can probably guess based on him calling me a libtard. But there's a website that I think I've talked about before. I've definitely talked about it on my Instagram. And it's called isidewith.com. It's an independent, self-funded, nonpartisan voter education website. And one of the things that I discovered about this website right around the last time we had the major election is that it, like they said, it seems to be non-biased. But one thing about this website, and I urge everybody who's listening to this podcast to go. You don't have to, there's no trackers. There's no one trying to sell you anything. You just go to isidewith.com, click on the political quiz, and just start taking the quiz. It should take you a while to complete it. I'm not talking hours, but if you get done in 5 minutes, then in my opinion, you didn't take your time. If you get done in 5 minutes, you're one of those people who was extreme left or extreme right. But for example, the first question is, should the federal government increase funding of healthcare for low-income individuals, aka Medicaid? And so it offers yes or no. And then there's another thing you can click that says other stances. If you click on other stances, and I'm doing this real time with you right now, it says yes, but only increase for the elderly and disabled. Yes, but I prefer switching to a single-payer healthcare system. No, and abolish Medicaid. No, and each state should decide their own level of coverage. No, and eligibility should only include the elderly and disabled. No, and the federal government should not increase funding for any social programs. Then you have the option to add your own stance, or you can say this question is no longer relevant and should be removed. So had I not clicked the other stances, I would have only seen yes or no. So if you go to this thing, which I urge you to do this, istandwith.com, go through, always click other stances, because these two yeses are different. It's a yes, but it comes with certain provisions. Their no's, there's 5 options for no. There's just flat out no, or no and do this, or no but this. And then if you don't really know what the question is about, there's a learn more button. When you click on that, it gives you like a short synopsis of what the question is. So you go through this and you answer all these questions. And then it, based on all your answers, it calculates and tells you what party affiliation you have. And it's very eye-opening because you evolve as the years go on, and so do the people, so do the parties, so do the presidential candidates. So let's say that you're always a Democrat. You may be surprised to find out you may actually agree with more Republican beliefs, current Republican beliefs. And if you're a Republican, you may actually identify more Democrat instead of just blindly going in and voting what you are. Or you could be a libtard like me. So this time when I did it a few days ago, I landed at 66% veterans. I didn't even know that was a party. Then I was 56 Republican, 53% transhumanist, which I didn't even know it existed until last time I did this quiz. And last time I did this quiz, transhumanist was actually number 1 on my results. Then I'm green 51, Democrat at 49. Then it goes down to 48 forward, 46 Constitution, 42% working families, peace and something like 40%. And then, of course, libertarian, I was down at like 32%, which means based on my answers, I agreed with about 32% of what liberals want to do. But what you can do is expand this and say, okay, who's my local representative? Who's my senator? And you can see where your state senator lands on all these topics. You can see where your presidential candidate, whether it's Chris Christie or RFK or Vivek, you can see exactly where they landed on all these topics. And it's eye-opening. It's awesome. And you could, I mean, it's not a voting system. You just learn who you really are and what you really believe in. And it just gets rid of all the noise out there. And that's isidewith.com. And I know this is kind of a long opening, but I'm very passionate about that because there's so many people out there who just think that they're this or that, or they think they know everything about anything and they don't actually know shit. Educate yourself. Find out who you really are. And obviously they don't sponsor this podcast, but it's important to me, and it's important to me to let you guys know. And I posted it on Instagram, and there's people who actually took the quiz, and I appreciate people who did that because there's other people who are like, well, I'm not going to do that. Okay, then don't do it. But try not to have a strong opinion next time you think you know something about something you probably don't know anything about. Coming up after this word from 4Wheel Online, Wes Tankersley is back and bought a Honda Civic. Jay Finning here, and I want to tell you guys about 4Wheel Online. For over a decade, 4Wheel Online has been bringing the best truck accessories and truck parts to enhance the appearance and performance of all trucks and SUVs. They are dedicated to providing an extensive range of upgrades that will match any maker model on the road. The truck products cover everything you need to give your truck a custom look and added functionality. And if you need a tire and wheel package, head over and use the configuration tool. They carry all the major brands of wheels and tires, so go get outfitted today. So visit them online at 4Wheel Online or call them at 813-769-2451. Again, that's 4Wheel Online, the number 4Wheel Online. Wes Tankersley, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
You know, you guys have been shuffling cars for a while, and you just recently picked up another car.
Yeah.
Tell us about it. Tell us why you keep shuffling vehicles and why you settled for the vehicle that you just did. And are you enjoying it?
So I think you kind of know that there's two vehicles. So which one are we talking about? The red one or the gray one?
Let's talk about the gray one. I think that's the one that's more on brand with me.
Okay. You know, when you first met me, I had a 2018 Silverado, and my wife hurt her back getting in and out of it because it was too tall.
That's right.
And so we ended up with a Pilot again because we had a Pilot before that, and she drove that around for a while. And what happened was we moved, right? So we're out here, we're 30 miles away from where we were before. It takes forever to get there. It's kind of like you talk about Arizona, and this is where we're going. You know, like it takes an hour to get anywhere or 30 minutes to get anywhere. And it's crazy. But my wife works in Boise, so she's got to drive there. Mm-hmm. And we live in Caldwell. So it's like my thoughts were, all right, we need our SUV. Our Pilot's not big enough for our family. Or if we want to haul any more people, like it's big enough for our family, but if you bring a couple more people, there's not enough room in it. So we decided
it's barely big enough for your family. You know, I think it was fine when there were 3 of you, but now there's 4 of you.
Yeah, now there's
sorry, 4. Buster.
Yeah, and then you got a car seat, right? You throw a car seat in there, and it's one of those things where now your car seat's in there. There's not enough room. The Pilot was great, but it didn't have what the Tahoe has that we ended up getting. So I had a crew cab truck that is actually my business vehicle. So I traded it in on a Tahoe, and then we took the Pilot and traded it in on a Honda Civic because the Honda Civic gets 40 miles a gallon, and we didn't have a car that got real good gas mileage. I mean, the Pilot was okay. It got like 20 something, but that's not 40. You know, like every time I get in that Civic, I look at it and it's like 40 miles a gallon, like the average. Like you can't beat that. So that was kind of why we did that. We ended up we kind of flopped them around. The Tahoe gave us more space, and then the Civic gave us better gas mileage. Just more, drive that around.
But you can't get a car just because of gas mileage, Wes. So there's a ton of cars out there. I mean, there has to be something else about the Civic, as it's got nice amenities. You like the CarPlay. I know you're not an Android Auto. Like, it's what package is it?
You know me. Like, I mean, here's the thing with me is like I have 2 types of vehicles that I drive: Chevys and Hondas, and that's it. And so I've gone back and forth with this whole deal for a while now, and Honda is just a great vehicle. They always make a really good car. I don't have to worry about anything going wrong. They're front wheel drive, so like when it's snowing outside, they do really well in the snow. You don't have to put snow tires on it, but I will, for my wife because she's commuting, and it's just I feel safer with her having snow tires on it. But a Honda Civic with snow tires, front wheel drive car is just as good as a 4-wheel drive. That's even better maybe.
Try to explain that. Like, explain that to people who don't realize that, because in theory, having a front-wheel drive vehicle with snow tires makes absolutely no sense. Like, do you remember life before snow tires and life after snow tires on front-wheel drive vehicle?
Yeah. So, when I was in high school, I had a 91 Chevy pickup. It was a 4-wheel drive. And
of course.
Yeah. Right. There we go. There's the Chevy. So 91 Chevy pickup is a 4-wheel drive. My dad thought he'd, hose me by putting me in a 4.3 V6 because it didn't have any power whatsoever. But people always think that 4-wheel drive is the way to go, right? But 4-wheel drive doesn't mean 4-wheel stop. It just means you're going to get good traction when you go. So you still have to drive, better. In a front-wheel drive car, essentially has, it's kind of like what a 4-wheel drive does. You got grip on your tires. So you put snow tires on there, and it's just so much better. Like, I honestly feel more comfortable driving that Civic. I guarantee you, I haven't had snow tires on it, but the previous ones that I've had, I feel more comfortable driving snow-tired Honda Civic than I do a 4-wheel drive, vehicle with no snow tires. So,
yeah, and there's a big difference between, what is that, a 23 Civic?
Yep. No, it's a
in a 91 truck.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that we used to have a Dodge Neon ES base model. When my wife, she crashed her car, or someone crashed her car, and she's like, I want a used car. It has to have power, everything. It's got to have less than 20,000 miles on it, and I don't want to pay more than $4,000 for it. And I'm kind of looking at her like, huh? So we end up with a Dodge Neon 2002 green ES, no power or anything. But I was driving that car to college, and I was going around the back side of the school, and I went to stop, and the car just kept sliding slowly. Just kept sliding 15 feet. Boom! Hit a curb, screwed up one of the wheels. And I eventually got Blizzaks on the front of that thing. And those Blizzaks, front-wheel drive, those holy crap, those Blizzaks were a life changer. So, for people out there watching, listening, or wondering if you're in a place that has like real winters, yes, it is definitely worth it to put winter tires on your car. Without those winter tires on that Neon, I never would have got off from work. That was 2 or 3 years before we moved here. It was the worst winter ever for us in West Michigan. That thing took me out of the hospital. And usually people go into the hospital, but I worked at the hospital. So I got off shift and I was leaving the hospital. That thing dragged me out of that parking lot, across the bridge, which I never would have got over, down my country road, and I got stuck in the bottom of my driveway. But if I didn't have those tires, I never would even got out of the parking lot at work. So I'm a believer in snow tires.
Yeah, and those Blizzaks, those are studless, right? They didn't have studs in them, did they?
I don't know. I just know they're legit.
Yeah. So it's funny because me, like I worked at a tire store.
Like you're the tire guy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so we had studless tires and we had studded tires, and studded tires, we had Toyo Observes, which were a Toyo studless tire. And then we also had the Bridgestone Blizzaks. And the Blizzaks were like, if someone asked me which one would I put on there, the Blizzak is it. It's like a softer rubber. It has more siping in it. It's just it sticks to the road. That's a good one.
They were studless because I was driving the car and I'm all the stud they need.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I had to work that in there. It took me a while to workshop it in my head as you were talking.
It's funny to me that you are I feel like you have Honda or Acura, or it's a Dodge. Why do you like Dodge? What's the deal with this? It's like you got a Dodge Neon, you had a Jeep. What's the deal with that?
So I don't consider a Jeep a Dodge.
But it is a Chrysler
Daimler
product,
Chrysler.
Right?
It's under the umbrella.
Yeah.
But I don't consider it the same. I guess, it kind of is, but isn't. But I mean, I'm on my second Infiniti. We've had 2 or 3 Audis.
Yeah.
And, I just don't go through cars like you do. Like I hardly ever have cars.
Mm-hmm.
The car that I have outside right now, there's 2 of them. The 2009 that I bought, 2.5 years ago, used obviously because it's 2023 now.
Yeah.
And then my weekend vehicle, the 22 Acura NSX, that's the first new car I've bought since 1999. So I've always bought used cars. And it's not because I'm against paying money for a new one. It's just we can never afford them.
Yeah. Well, you're smart because that's, the cool thing about what happened with this is I kind of shifted money is what I did. I had equity in my truck and I put that equity in the Civic. And the idea with the Civic is we bought it, we leased the Tahoe, but we're buying the Civic. And I put my equity into that. And then when Tatum is old enough to drive, my daughter, who is 10 right now, she'll, they can drive in like 14 or 15. We'll probably have the car paid off by that point and it will be her car, is the thought. If I don't know. I always go back and forth with that. It's like, does she deserve something that nice for her first car? Because I had a 91 Chevy.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? We can go into a whole dissertation about what to give kids. Like our son Marcelo, I wanted to sell him our Audi, and my wife wanted to give it to him. And it's just shocker, right?
Yeah.
And he turned out all right, but that was just one of those things that no one knows your kids like your kids to a certain extent because people at school will be like, you don't know your kid at all, but you know what your kid's hard coding is from day one, right? And so for him. I don't know how Tatum is, but he's just incredibly entitled. And so the last thing you want to give somebody that's entitled is something that they didn't work hard for.
Right.
So he's learned over time he works hard for everything he has now, although there's still a little bit of entitlement there.
Mm-hmm.
But as a 27-year-old, he's a lot more mature. And now he'd happily take a car if you gave it to him, but he doesn't mind working for it either. Whereas then he just felt like I should just get this car.
Yeah. And I think that's a generational thing. Like, I feel like I think you and I have talked about this a lot because like my first car that I got, my 91 Chevy that I got, my dad went down there and he co-signed on the loan for me so that I could get it. But he was like, dude, and he paid for my insurance, but he's like, you're making the payment on this thing. We'll help you if there's something going on. So like if I was playing sports and I couldn't work that weekend or something, like when we had to go to state,
Right.
we'd get on a bus on Thursday night or late Thursday night, stay Friday night in Portland, and then play a game on Saturday and then not be back. So I couldn't work. So they're like, well, okay, we'll supplement you this month. But those were the only times that we paid for it. Like my daughter thinks that we're just going to give her whatever. And it's like, that's not the way that it
She's
works.
also 10.
She is 10. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
She is. But when she's able to work, because like, I think that's when you start to realize that you actually, something means something to you. Like the first pair of shoes I bought myself lasted me a year because I paid for them. But every pair of shoes that my parents bought me last me 6 months, because it was like, I didn't care about it like I did when I had to use my own money on it.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of a psychological thing, and it's not applicable to everybody,
Right.
but statistically, I think that's, you care about more things the harder you have to work for them versus given things. And that's just how people are. Some people would rather be given everything and it doesn't matter to them, but they just don't get it. And I think you learn that about people pretty early. Obviously, people can change. I know some people say people don't change. I say people do change, but it takes life's experiences usually to change people. I want to thank Wes Tankersley for joining the show. That was actually, I stole that section from his podcast. It's an episode that's coming out in the future. So if you want to hear the whole thing, and I urge you to listen to the whole thing, it is going to be on Wes Tankersley podcast, probably at the end of the month, and that is Shaping Success. So look for that, somewhere around Halloween. If you are one of those people who put down money on a Cybertruck, you're probably never going to get it. There's news all over the place. I'm going to read this from Autoblog, dated 10/22 of 23. Cybertruck, 4 GM EV pickups, trucks in demand. It says, despite the company finally revealing a November 30th delivery date for the Cybertruck for at least a few select customers, Elon Musk warned of enormous challenges in ramping up Cybertruck production, and that volume production of 250,000 units would not be reached until 2025. We've actually seen, I haven't personally seen, but it's been spotted here in Arizona. There was a car carrier full of these Cybertrucks. So we never thought they were going to get here. Sounds like they're here. I'm not crazy about them because they're kind of stupid looking, but at the same time, they're kind of cool looking, if that makes sense. But I'm excited to see them on the road. So tell me if you're excited to see them on the road. Yasu over in Japan, tell me if you're excited to see them. And do you guys even get them over there? I could Google it, but why? You're my boots on the ground. There's also an article in here, ranking EV frunks from best to worst. So you guys know what a frunk is, right? It's the part of a vehicle. So if you open up the hood and there's storage there, instead of an engine, it's called a frunk. So a lot of Porsches have frunks. People assume the NSX has a frunk. The NSX does not have a frunk. The 2022 GMC Hummer EV has one of the biggest frunks on the market. Well, yeah, it's a fucking Hummer. So coming in at number one, the F-150 Lightning has 14.1 cubic frunk of feet. I added the frunk part of that. The Hummer has 11. The Rivian has 11. This isn't even interesting, is it? Like, as I'm reading this, I'm not interested in how big the frunk is of a vehicle. The only one that even makes sense is this Mustang Mach-E, where they actually put a cooler up there. That's great use of a frunk. It's away from the engine. It's covered. Put a little ice in there. You know what they should do is these frunks need to be waterproof. And then you just fucking dump a bunch of ice in there. I feel like, is that in a commercial? Well, I would totally fill that thing up with beverages and tailgate straight out of the frunk. Tailgating from the frunk. So you see Teslas and you see people like girlfriends crawl up in it. You can't do it in the Porsche Taycan. It's Taycan, right? I never know how to say it because it looks like it's got a carpeted frunk. Definitely don't want ice on the carpeted frunk. The Polestar also has a carpeted frunk. And then in last place is the Hyundai Ioniq Q, the Kia EV6, the Kia Niro, and the Genesis GV60. But unlike the aforementioned, this looks like it's plastic. There's no drain holes. Why would there be? So never mind what I said about putting ice in there, unless you lined it with a bag, and then it would just look stupid. Here's another article. Elon Musk blasts the work from home crowd, saying they are detached from reality. I don't know, man. I don't know about you guys listening. I work from home 100% of the time. I don't think I'm detached from reality at all. Maybe Elon Musk is detached from reality because he lives in cyberspace somewhere. I know people don't want to go back to work. I would love to go back to work physically, like once a month. But I think I'm not detached from reality. And I think if you're listening to this podcast, you're not detached from reality. I don't have any strong opinions on Elon Musk, but I disagree that as a whole, we're all detached from reality. I want to thank Right Honda and Right Toyota, FrollOnline.com, Sell Shop Wireless Services, Patreon business supporter, Q Automotive out of Winter Garden, Florida, Pell Construction out of Conway, Michigan, B House Small Home Design out of Ashburn, Virginia, and Traverse City, Michigan. Shaping Success with Wes Tankersley out of Boise, Idaho. You heard him here on this show. Also catch us every Wednesday for One Drink Wednesday at 7 o'clock Pacific time on Instagram Live. If you want to be a Patreon, you can go to patreon.com, Hard Parking Podcast. Join the show for as little as $3 a month. Special shout out to Mark Stolman, Catherine Cox, Lee Ramos, Richard Grace, Byron Jones, Bo Jung, Alex Camina, and Drew Bunkley. Questions, comments, or concerns, hardparkingpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to leave me a review. Follow me on Instagram @jfinning and join the Hard Parking Violations Facebook group. Thank you for all the latest violators. I'm not going to give you anything, but make sure you join the Hard Parking channel on Instagram where I do give stuff away. Because I can't grow, like telling the world how great this show is. Let's do this. Let's grow this thing together, and I will talk to you all next week.
Finally got around to trying that Arby's Wagyu burger. It was alright. I ain't like the little dressing shit they put on it.
Shut up!